The most powerful investor behind the age of exploration wasn't an explorer, not a king, not a merchant prince. It was an institution most people never think of as a financial backer at all. An institution that didn't build ships, didn't sail oceans, and never touched gold with its own hands, yet quietly shaped the economic logic of global expansion itself. It was the Catholic Church, and without it, the modern world would not exist in anything like its current form. Welcome to the Hidden Ledger, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. When we picture the age of exploration, we're sold a romantic myth. Brave men staring into the horizon, wooden ships vanishing into fog, flags planted on distant shores. What we're almost never shown is the balance sheet. Because exploration wasn't driven by curiosity, it was driven by capital allocation under extreme uncertainty. Late 15th century Europe was financially exhausted. Wars had drained treasuries, the Black Death had shattered populations, tax systems were weak, credit was fragile. Long-distance voyages took years, consumed enormous resources, and offered no guaranteed return. Ships vanished, crews died, expeditions failed quietly and expensively. From a purely financial perspective, overseas exploration made no sense at all. High risk, delayed payoff, almost total information blindness. Private merchants could fund a voyage or two, kings could afford symbolic attempts, but sustained expansion across unknown oceans required something else entirely. It required an institution that could think in centuries, not quarters. One that could absorb repeated failure without collapsing. One that could turn violence into legality and uncertainty into destiny. That institution already existed. By the late Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was not just a religious authority. It was the largest landowner in Europe, the most stable transnational organization on earth, a bureaucracy that outlived kings, dynasties, and wars. In modern terms, it was the closest thing the world had ever seen to a supranational sovereign with a permanent balance sheet. And most importantly, it controlled something no king or merchant could manufacture on their own: the authority to decide what was lawful. Here's where the story stops being romantic and becomes economic. The church did not fund exploration by writing checks or loading ships with gold. That's the mistake almost everyone makes. It funded exploration in a far more powerful way. It reduced risk. It created legitimacy. It issued something more valuable than money: permission. In a world with no international law, no global courts, and no shared concept of property beyond Europe, papal authority functioned as a legal operating system. When the Pope declared a claim valid, it became valid. Not just spiritually, politically. Conquest stopped being piracy. Seizure stopped being theft. Violence became administration. This is why papal bulls mattered more than canons. When the church issued decrees granting newly discovered lands to Catholic monarchs, it wasn't making a theological statement. It was creating enforceable property rights over territories no European had ever mapped. The most infamous example came in 1494, when a single imaginary line drawn across the Atlantic divided most of the non-European world between Spain and Portugal. No surveys, no consent, just authority. From a financial perspective, this was revolutionary. The church had eliminated legitimacy risk, the fear that an expedition's gains would later be challenged, condemned, or invalidated. Investors didn't need to worry whether conquest would be recognized. It was pre-approved. That dramatically lowered the cost of capital. It turned exploration from reckless speculation into sanctioned expansion. And only two states were positioned to exploit this system immediately: Spain and Portugal. These kingdoms became the operating arms of a sacred investment model. The church provided legal authority and moral cover. The crowns supplied ships, soldiers, and administrators. Together, they built the first global extraction economy. Early voyages weren't especially expensive by royal standards. What made them transformative wasn't cost, it was upside. By the mid-15th century, silver shipments from the Americas reshaped European monetary systems. Inflation surged, fortunes were created and destroyed. And behind it all sat an institution that had claimed its share, not through trade, but through authorization. The church didn't demand dividends, it demanded structure. Land grants for religious orders, mandatory tithes in the colonies, exclusive rights to conversion, permanent presence inside colonial governance. Power that compounded without reinvestment. This is what's usually missed. The church wasn't chasing short-term profit, it didn't need to. It converted economic expansion into permanent institutional power. Conquest justified conversion. Conversion legitimized governance. Governance normalized extraction. Extraction funded further conquest. The church didn't need to manage this loop. It owned the moral framework that made the loop appear righteous. And nothing compounds power more reliably than controlling the story people tell themselves about why domination is necessary. This was the true funding model of the age of exploration. Not courage, not curiosity. Legitimacy engineered at scale. An institution that understood centuries before modern finance that the most valuable asset in any risky venture isn't capital. It's the right to claim the outcome as lawful. When the system began to fracture, it didn't do so quietly. It broke with rebellions, confiscations, and wars that lasted generations. What collapsed wasn't belief, it was authority. Once legitimacy stopped flowing from Rome, the financial logic of exploration changed forever. Northern Europe rejected papal supremacy. A papal decree no longer reduced risk. A blessing no longer guaranteed protection. The referee had lost the room. And when religion stopped underwriting expansion, capital stepped in. Exploration didn't end, it privatized. Chartered companies replaced sacred mandates. Contracts replaced blessings. Shareholders replaced saints. The most powerful imperial tool of the 18th century wasn't the cross or the crown. It was the charter. This is how exploration without God was born. The age of exploration was never funded by bravery or belief. It was funded by institutions that knew how to convert legitimacy into leverage. When religion controlled legitimacy, it financed empire. When religion lost that control, capital took its place. The tools changed, the structure didn't. This is the hidden ledger. History has the answers.